So as promised last week, we go now to the practical halacha regarding the Seudas of Purim when Purim falls on a Friday. So just to summarize the few nekudas that we spoke about, started last week, we're into it, that the Ramah says clearly that when should the Seudas of Purim be when it falls on a Friday? It should be in the morning. Maisi says every year, if a person wants to do it in the morning, he's able to do it in the morning. So you should do it in the morning. That's what the Ramah learns. I saw now that Al-Pi Kabbalah is brought down in the Shlah. There's Al-Pi in Yanim Al-Pi Kabbalah as well to do it in the morning. Now, many other places can bring that doesn't have to be the morning. It could be the afternoon before the 10th hour. Meaning the day is divided into proportional hours. And as long as you don't start the meal within the 3 hours before Shabbos, you should be fine. And that's really the shita that, as the Yad Ephraim points out, that is the Maharil. The Maharil himself, when he speaks about, Maharil we mentioned last week, he speaks about you could do the meal right before the time of Mincha, which means before that 10th hour, and that should be fine. So brings the Aruch HaShulchan that you should do the meal then, and you should be okay. So that is called second shift. So the Ramah says do in the morning. Many places can bring as long as you do before the end of the 9th hour. You started before the last quarter of the day, so you're fine.
And it's clear you can't go into Shabbos.
Oh, it's it. So this is starting just doing the meal at that time of the day. Same. Now what happens after that time? Can you start the meal? Forget about now, we're going into Shabbos. Can you start the meal later in the day, in the last quarter of the day? So there, the Aruch HaShulchan says, we saw last week, he says, yes, you could, because really it's a Seudas mitzvah. And the same way you could do a Bris Milah or Pidyon Haben in the end, you could do also the Seudah after 10 at that time. I saw it was brought down in the Mesiris Moshe, where the Shmuas and the name of Moshe Feinstein, he as well said, regarding, we mentioned last week, someone who's working on Purim, who's working on Purim, and he comes home late, so he should do the Seudah then, he could do the Seudah at that time. So that is in terms of doing it on Friday. Again, Amos says do it in the morning. The many of the places can bring as long as before the last quarter is okay. And then comes the Shulchan, some others that say that you could do it as long as it's before Shabbos. Now comes the idea of Piris Mapo Mekadosh. So before going to Piris Mapo, I want to mention the Rav over here, Rabbi Stern, said on Shabbos that there is, and it's a true thing, before even going into the Inyanim and the Halacha issues that you have, not issues, the Halacha topics you have to deal with, to know that there's a lot of shaylas that can happen when a person does Paris Mapo Mekadosh. Just technically, when a person, for people, you have a tzibur, and people have phones with them, people come with cars, figuring out, getting dressed to Big Day Shabbos, when you're taking a shower. So once you're going in the Seudah from before Shabbos into Shabbos, you have to take that into account, that could cause people to make some mistakes, and it's a bad dover nocha to remember that. Now, it's also to mention, the idea of Paris Mapo Mekadosh is the Maharil we mentioned last week, says clearly, the Paris Mapo Mekadosh, at least the Shoyel, it says when he says it to the Maharil, it says Paris Mapo Mekadosh is a di'evet. It's not a lechatchila. So already we have many shit. First of all, I call them Shoyel. Second of all, you get the Paris Mapo Mekadosh, it could be a di'evet. But as we mentioned, there are people that have a minhag to do Paris Mapo Mekadosh specifically. We said the Meiri and Ksuvis bring such a thing, such a minhag. There's a minhag brought down, and also a few other Sifrei Kadmonim. And as we saw, the Magen Avraham brings the Lashon HaMordechai that sounds, you can argue, in the Lashon HaMordechai, in the Mordechai, found the letter from the Mordechai, that maybe you should do Paris Mapo Mekadosh, or at least someone who's eating Seudas Purim and he comes Shabbos, he should do Paris Mapo Mekadosh. And many Gedolim did do Paris Mapo Mekadosh, and although there was, as some mentioned, could be they had different reasons. Could be, for example, maybe they couldn't eat 2 meals in one day. So just to know that there's some that have a minhag of Paris Mapo Mekadosh. That's number one. Number two, someone who's sick, and cannot eat 2 meals. It's impossible. He can eat only 1 meal. So for him, clearly, he should do Paris Mapo Mekadosh. He has to do 2 meals. He has to do the meal of Purim, and he has to do the meal of Shabbos. So let's say he can't do it in the morning. It's impossible. So then the one thing he can do is Paris Mapo Mekadosh. And the third mitzvah says, and this, the Ramosh that we mentioned, at least brings that as a havamina. Someone who comes home late from work, and maybe mamish needs to start the meal right before Shabbos, after the better for him to do Paris Mapo. So we're going to go address how you do Paris Mapol for the people that either need it or forced to do it, or someone has a minhag that he has to do it because his minhag Rabbi Yisrael. Putting out the shir tomorrow is the Machshava shir. Comes in, it's going to be also in writing. The base of the Shem Shmuel, it comes out that maybe it's a big Indian to connect Mekasher the Seudah of Purim to the Seudah of Shabbos. So maybe there's such a Indian. So yes, the Poiskim Mubam was saying not to do it. The Maharil says that the Eved. So it's only the one who's either forced to do it or has a minhag to do it. But as you go and do it, the question is how do you do it? And that in itself, as we go through the different details doing Paris Mapol Mekadesh, is you're going to come to some technical issues that we see why it gets so complicated. So again, what Paris Mapol Mekadesh means? Really means it's as the Gemara in Pesachim says, someone is sitting eating his Seudah on Erev Shabbos. The way the Gemara says is, suddenly comes Shabbos, what do? Gemara brings a story. I'm wearing that tonight we see it together. So suddenly comes Shabbos, what do? It says Paris Mapol, you put a mappa on the pashtas, the chalas, and then you do Kiddush. So you're doing Kiddush, and then you continue through the Shabbos. So it's a meal that starts on Friday and goes into Shabbos. Someone will say, I saw that someone brings in the ear of Cook, that when was that Friday that they went into Shabbos in the Gemara Pesachim? That was through the Purim. And the Gemara then brings a pasuk that one said a Memra, the other one said he brings a pasuk from Megillas Esther. Why specifically he brought that pasuk? Because it was through the Purim that went into Shabbos. So a very geshmak that the meal we find in the Gemara that they did it maybe in Purim. As we mentioned, the Mogen Avraham says that he found for the Mordechai such a thing. So what do you do? So now technically, how do you do it? You do Paris Mapol Mekadesh. So first of all, clearly if you're doing one big suit, you have to do mincha before. That's pashut. That also, the many poskim say to do Seudas Purim generally after, even though Rambam says to do in the morning, many say to do it after mincha. Why? To be mekayim mitzvah sayim in the morning, including mishloach manos, matos levyim, and to daven mincha before you drink. Because once you drink, you have a problem. There's some level of shichus you can't daven mincha. So you better to daven mincha before in general. Clearly here you can't have a mincha, you'll be stuck in mincha. You do mincha before, that's the approach you go into mincha.
And then you're starting after Chatzos.
Yeah, no, after Chatzos you said, many places you could do after Chatzos, as long as you start before the 10th hour. Now, there is a discussion, and it's muchach, that the whole idea that you have to start before the 10th hour is only if you're doing a meal that ends before Shabbos. But a meal that turns to be the Seudah Shabbos itself, after you don't have to start there. If you're doing Paris Mapol, whatever reason, whatever hectare you have to do Paris Mapol, you don't have to start before the 10th hour, you can start right before Shabbos. So you start the meal, eating the meal of Purim, comes Shabbos. Now what do? So you have to light candles. Lighting candles must be done, for sure before Shkia, but the should be done in Zman Adlakas Neros. So the woman have to make sure, you look at the watch, make sure the 18 minutes before Shkia, the woman goes and does Adlakas Neros. The man, the woman can do as well, should do Kabbalah Shabbos. Kabbalah Shabbos, you don't have to leave the table. You can do Kabbalah Shabbos at the table. Adi Rabbi brought down that maybe if Shai Develitsky brings it to do Kabbalah Shabbos on the table, he brings a Mishayo that maybe there's some minhagim they don't do a full Kabbalah Shabbos. They do a Kabbalah Shabbos like you do when it's Yom Tov Samach Shabbos. Bring such minhagim. So you do at least the minimum amount of Kabbalah Shabbos that you need. The Mizu Shir and Shabbos and the Shamalach, if you do that, maybe you sing, if you want to do the entire thing, you do Kabbalah Shabbos during the meal, they try to do it, it's kedai to do it before it's Shkia, because the Chatchila, the Ikar Kabbalah Shabbos to do it before Shkia. Now yes, you could do it after like every other Shabbos, but once Shabbos comes in, you can't eat without Kiddush. So you're going to have to stop anyway for it to do Kiddush, so better to do Kabbalah Shabbos first. Kabbalah Shabbos is, according to Shulchan Aruch, when you say Mizu Shem Shabbos, that's when you do Kabbalah Shabbos for the men. According to the Mishnah, when you say Bo Yichali in the Kabbalah Shabbos, so that's Kabbalah Shabbos. If you Kabbalah Shabbos, you do it during the meal. Now you do Kiddush. Now, so before Kiddush, maybe before we get to Kiddush, what about Ma'ariv? Should you do Ma'ariv or not do Ma'ariv? So the problem is like this. Ma'ariv brings a little bit of a problem. Because if you stop for Ma'ariv, so then you stop the meal. So that goes into a shayk, can I do a tefillah during the meal or not? The normal pasuk is you could do it, even though maybe it's a little bit of a diafet. You could do Ma'ariv during the meal. But if stopping to do Ma'ariv during the meal, why shouldn't you bench and wash again? That's one halacha. Okay, maybe you're insisting on doing Paris Mapol Mekadesh. The issue is that when you're doing Ma'ariv during the meal, comes the Mogen Avraham and says, then you for sure cannot do a lanisim when you do Birkas Hamazon. Because once you did Ma'ariv, you did a hefsek of Ma'ariv. When you continue the meal, you for sure can't do Al Nisim. That's what the Mogen Avraham. We'll see in a moment. We'll get back to Al Nisim in a moment. Now, if you're doing the Ma'ariv, another way to do it, if you don't want to stop in the meal, you could do Ma'ariv after the meal. That's what Mogen Avraham says. Mogen Avraham says do Ma'ariv after the meal. But you should know that Al Pi the Arizal, there's a certain say, the Kaf HaChaim brings it. There's a certain seder of davening. The seder is supposed to be that you do Kabbalah Shabbos, Ma'ariv, Kiddush, Seudas. And when you don't do the order, you mebalbel it, you say things, it's not great to do not to change the order. So Shkam comes over here, if you're doing the different order, if you're doing Ma'ariv after the meal, you're not Mekayim that Arizal, so brings this issue as a problem, you're not Mekayim in the So either you do Ma'ariv during the meal, you can stop the meal. If you have 10 men, you do Ma'ariv with them right over there. It's not a problem. But if you're leaving anyway and going to shul, you're not marviach too much. You just do benching, do Ma'ariv, come back and do it again. Because then you have to do Kiddush in a Moitzi. So all you're gaining is because of the Bikasavazin, because you're getting to the issues of the Diavad. If anyway you're doing Ma'ariv in the middle, unless you're doing Ma'ariv in the place, then for sure you should do already Bikasavazin. So Ma'ariv, let's assume like the Mogen Avraham, you're doing after the meal. Kiddush. You have to do Kiddush. How do you do Kiddush? You put it in Purim Mapo, pick up the kois, you do Kiddush. What about Bori Priya Gofen? Now, if you didn't drink wine till now, so I don't know which Purim did you have, but okay. So, of course, you have to do Bori Priya Gofen. But if you did Kiddush before or not, do you do a bracha or not? So that's a machlokes rishonim. Machlokes depends on two different inyanim. First of all, it's considered to be a hefsek. Once you're doing Kiddush, what? So no, so if you don't do it, you don't have to do it. Shah is considered to be a hefsek to do a bracha, you have to do it because you have to do Kiddush. So you have to do it. So that, if you have to do it, it's not bracha shen tzricha. Second is, it could be that the Bori Priya Gofen is nitzrach for the Kiddush. In other words, part of the Kiddush is Bori Priya Gofen. Some Rishonim hold you have to do Bori Priya Gofen. But some Rishonim hold you don't. And the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, when he speaks about prayers Ma'apon, Simon Reish and Aleph, he says, if you drink wine before, no bracha of the wine. So why you don't do? Now, what about hamoitzi? Do you say hamoitzi or not? So here again, it's machlokes rishonim. Machlokes rishonim, do you do hamoitzi? Some say that once you did kiddush, you did a hefsek. You stopped the previous meal and went to the next one. Some say that's not a hefsek. So the Shulchan Aruch himself brings, he says, he says you do it. So the Mishnah we don't do hamoitzi. So already you're going into, you see, once you do praise Ma'am you get into a little bit of the issues. Do I do Bori Priya Gofen? We basking you don't do because Sovek Brachas La'akel. Shulchan Aruch says you don't do. Hamoitzi you don't do. It's a machlokes. Sovek Brachas La'akel I don't do. But already you can understand. Maybe that's what my real means is at the Eved. You never yaitz all the shittas. What?
What kind of kiddush could you do then? You don't make either bracha.
You start with you do a chulu, and then you say the Kaddish Shabbos. It's how bracha becomes the night.
Nothing gets eaten up. Yeah.
No, then you do a moitzi. I mean, then you take off. Then it says you have to think. That's a very good nikudo. You have to do like a mishnah. No, now it's a big chiddush because if you do like a mishnah without because moitzi with like a mishnah, is it? But there is such a thing. You take the two lechem, shtei lechem, this, and you pick it up. So this is my lechem mishnah. You have to say the words. Chav lechem mishnah, and you eat it.
So you're eating it. You wash the
I think you go around the block.
You wash it for what?
Walk around the block.
If you want to pick a samazin. So we're talking about if you're not doing pick a samazin. No, so if you walk around the block, you have to do pick a samazin. Right? So that's what you have. So you have your kiddush, you don't do geffen. You don't do. Now, you come to the end of the meal, and let's say you didn't daven ma'ariv. You do pick a samazin. Do you say ala nisim or not? Now, the Mogen Avraham we mentioned before said, if you do, what? Oh, so Mogen Avraham said it depends if you daven ma'ariv or not. Halacha Mogen Avraham, when he brings this kedai, because we mentioned this Mogen Avraham so many times, just to mention it inside again, he brings B'mordechai Kosu B'klaf. I found in a klaf, a parchment, what he saw. Hayayichas Seudas Purim Be'ev Shabbos. He's eating Seudas Purim Be'ev Shabbos. Yispalel v'yifris mapo v'yikadish. Shtaven ma'ariv. Sheprayes mapo. U'b'mosin yoyim ala nisim. That's the Mordechai. The mashmos, the Mogen Avraham brings sounds you should do prayers mapo. Doesn't sound like bench quickly and then, okay. Mashma the mispal shuv eino imer alanisim. Says the Magen Avraham, if you did Maariv, don't do alanisim. If you did do Maariv, you can't do alanisim. Chen koso shlo. Umaril b'tshuva. Chen nirali teivor because samoz and tchila. V'achak ispal arbis lo yitzi esmoi plukto. Meaning first bench and then do Maariv. Meaning the way Pashas Magen Avraham means you do finish the entire meal and do Maariv after the meal.
Would say you do say.
Oh, so you say Ritzei. If that's Seudas Shabbos, yes. When the Seudas Shabbos, you have to do Ritzei. So Magen Avraham Mashra. Oh, Magen Avraham Mashra, you do Ritzei and Yalav. That's Mamish Ritzei and Yalav. Mash almost lehed you the Magen Avraham. So regular Purim you don't have a problem. You can do Yalav because it goes into the night. Oh, so then you have a problem with Anisim, yes. Before you have a problem with Anisim. What?
Why isn't it the same problem as mine? How can you say Al Nisim? It's not the same.
No, because the meal is both. Oh, so you're asking, what about Tati the Sasha? So this is what I want to conclude. The Mishnah Berurah brings, you can't say Ritzei and Al Nisim. You can't say both, because Ritzei means it's Shabbos, Al Nisim means it's Purim. It can't be both. So therefore,
if you have a Meir, according to that, you should be able to say Al Nisim after Meir also.
No, because once you did Meir, you stopped. You did Hafsaka. That's where. What did I say? So Mishnah Berurah holds you can do both. Can't be Ritzei Al Nisim. So therefore what? So therefore Mishnah Berurah Zok, that if you're doing Paris Mapo, regardless if you're down Mayiv, if you didn't down Mayiv, you should not do Al Nisim. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. So Mishnah Berurah says you don't do Al Nisim even if you didn't have a Mayiv. But Magen Avraham clearly says you do say Al Nisim. It's rather than the Meiri that we mentioned last week that says to do Paris Mapo, so that's the minute to do Paris Mapo, he brings Anu v'aviseinu noagim b'purim shechad v'av Shabbos shematchilim b'sudim v'boydoim Ad sheikad she'er u'porsim mapo u'mekachim, that's the minute. V'goyim yisasuda u'maskirim bo shel Purim. Al Nisim. Why? Mitam zeh shari af chamisha soyoim nesu. So there's another reason to do it, because the 15th of Adar is also Purim dik. We don't say Al Nisim on the 15th only. But here to come and say it's not tied to the Sastre. Shabbos going into Purim. So that's what he says. So that's the Meiri brings. So Lamaisa comes out that if you follow the Mishnah Berurah, according to Mishnah Berurah, it comes out that when you come into the meal, you're doing Kabbalah Shabbos, right, when it comes close to Shkia, the woman should light candles at a regular time. You do the Ma'ariv, you could do either during the meal or right after the meal. That's a Pi Halacha, Pi Kabbalah, maybe Zaini not to do it after the meal. And then you're doing Kiddush with Agri Pirgofen. You're doing a Moitzi without a Moitzi. You're doing Lechamisha without a Moitzi. And when you end the meal, even though you didn't have a Ma'ariv, you say Ritzei without Al Nisim. Anybody wants to do Al Nisim, Yesh Shalom Lisbon. So if you follow Mishnah Berurah Diti, you don't do it. And here, this is how we ended. Another reason maybe it's not so Gishmak to do a Paris Mapo, because someone who does Paris Mapo, unless he has a minion with him, he will not have a minion when he can have a minion for Ma'ariv. He finishes the meal, I don't know what time he finishes the meal, he's going to look for a Ma'ariv and Chaim Hashem, maybe Chaim Hashem will have throughout the night. That'll solve the problem. But you also have a problem, he did not Ma'ariv B'chidis. That goes also another not B'chatchila thing.
Why is the Paris Mapo so strong? Not to make that Moitzi, not to make that Gofen. It's a bench.
Oh. So that's the L'chura, that's what I mentioned before. The L'chura, that's what the Ma'ariv means. The Paris Mapo is a B'di'evet. Paris Mapo sounds a B'di'evet. So why? Because nice, you coming out, you're not really doing a gefen with the very big. So you're missing out these Rishonim. You're not doing a Moitzi, you're missing out these Rishonim. You're coming into many issues in Halacha, except the Mechshelos we mentioned before. So unless you have either a big tzorich to do it, or that's the minhag. You have a minhag that you want to follow. So without that, you should have Paris Mapo. It comes into many Halacha issues. If you don't have if you do, this is how you're supposed to do. Say it, Governor.